Hello brewers, happy 2017 to you all. So I thought I'd kick off the new year with a quick tutorial video. This one's going to be on batch priming your beer. So basically priming with sugar in one go, i.e. a batch prime, just to save you time and hassle of trying to load individual measures of sugar into bottles or whatever you're using to package your beer. So here's the brew that I'm going to be batch priming today. This is a Boston style lager. It's based on a clone of Samuel Adams, hopped with Hallertau Mittelfrüh and Bobek. So looking forward to trying this one out. It smells fantastic already. Should be good. Here is my bottling bucket, and I'm also using that at the moment to sterilise all of my bottling gear. So siphon tubes, dipstick, stirring paddle, and a few other little bits in there. Sanitation, obviously really important as always, so just make sure that everything that's coming into contact with the beer, the bottling bucket itself and all of the tubing and so on, any taps that you're going to be running the beer through to get it into the bottles later, have all had sanitizing fluid run through them. So I've got the siphon up and running now, just racking that beer off into the bottling bucket. One of these little siphon clips here is an absolute godsend, so you don't have to stand there holding on to the tube during the whole process. Once I've got the siphon flowing, I can just leave it to do its thing. As you can see there, it's a good idea to try and keep the buckets slightly covered if you can, so I'm going to pop this lid back over the top here just to reduce the chance of any nasties floating in. So the reason that I'm racking it off to a bottling bucket is twofold. First of all, I'm removing the beer from any debris that's in the fermentation vessel. So as well as yeast and trub at the bottom, I've also got dry hops in this beer as well. So on the end of my dipstick here there's a little filter bag which is going to help to keep all of that stuff out, and as you can see we're siphoning a nice clear brew into the bucket because of that. The other reason is when we're batch priming we're going to add sugar solution into this bucket, and it's a good idea to give that a little bit of a stir around. If you're doing that in the FV, there's a good chance that you're going to disturb a lot of this stuff at the bottom and end up with a lot of yeast and sediment going into your bottles. So that will take longer to clear and it will leave you with more debris at the bottom of the bottles. So here we have it all siphoned off into the bottling bucket. You can siphon straight onto your priming solution if you want to. That will help to mix it in sort of naturally as it's siphoning into the bottling bucket. I tend to add the priming solution afterwards so that I can actually get a more accurate measure of the final volume that I've got being packaged. So the markings on this bucket are a little bit out, so this is actually about 18 litres rather than 20 litres that we've got there, which is about what I was expecting, because you're always going to lose a little bit to the trub and dry hopping as well that you've got left in the FE over here. Just having a little sample as well to check how it is, and yeah, tastes pretty good so far, so that's quite promising. So now we just need to add some priming solution to this, and then we can begin to bottle it. So I'm now making up the priming solution. I've got about 85 grams of sugar here. I've used a calculator to work out how much sugar I should have. This is slightly affected by the fact that this was a lager that I've been brewing, so the temperature has altered slightly the amount of sugar that you would put in, according to the calculator anyway. I'm adding about twice as much water by weight to the sugar to make the solution, and then I'm just going to boil this up for about 10 minutes. There's not a huge amount of water in there, so I will put a lid on it once I've dissolved the sugar. So just give it a little stir until the sugar is mostly dissolved, bring it to the boil, and then cover and simmer it for 10 minutes so it's nice and sterile before it goes into the beer. We don't want to add too much liquid so that we're diluting the brew down, but equally we don't want it to be too viscous and thick and making it more difficult to actually incorporate into the beer. So there we go, that's dissolved now, and we'll just pop a lid on that until it comes up to a boil. So I've just used bog standard granulated sugar in this to batch prime with. You can use anything you want that's fermentable, so things like honey or malt extract, brewing sugar, any of those. They will ferment at slightly different rates though, which will affect the calculation for how much you need to add. In this brew, I've used the calculator to add hopefully 2.2 volumes of CO2, which is at the sort of low end for a lager, but this beer I think won't really suit being too fizzy. It's more of a sort of amber lager really. I think it would be nicer with a slightly lower level of carbonation, but 2.2 should still give it a definite fizz and plenty of bubbles, so that's what I've gone for. In terms of priming rates, as I said, the best thing to do is to find a calculator that works for you and work from that. As a general guide, I would say for a very low level of carbonation, you should be aiming for about 3 grams of sugar per litre. So that's going to give you a very light sort of fizz or just slight frothiness. So thinking kind of cask ale type carbonation there. For a general purpose carbonation, I would go for about 4.5 grams of sugar per litre, so that will give you usually about 2 volumes of CO2, which is a good midpoint if you're not sure where to start. That will suit most styles and is a good place to start for pretty much any kind of ale that you might brew at home. And then towards the top end, so getting up towards 2.4 volumes of CO2, you'd want to be adding around 6 grams per litre. That's going to give you a very obvious amount of fizz, so lagers, wheat beers, Belgian styles where you want a very clear level of carbonation and lots of froth or head on the beer, that would be the sort of level that you want to aim for. But experiment for yourself and try and find out where you want it to be. I would normally work between sort of 2 and 2.1 for most styles, but some people prefer less, some people like a bit more fizz in their beer. So here we have our solution ready to go into the beer. I'm just going to very gently pour it into the bottling bucket. So we want to avoid splashing and lots of bubbles. We don't want to oxygenate our brew because that will potentially lead to it going stale. I'm now going to use my mash paddle just to give this a little bit of a stir. Again, I don't really want to be creating splashing or bubbles, but I do want to make sure that that sugar solution is evenly distributed through the beer. Otherwise you can have uneven carbonation. Some bottles will have hardly any fizz, some will probably be gushers, or at worst they will give you bottle bombs, which are not much fun to deal with. So if you get a little bit of a spin going there, that should help to combine it all together. And we're now ready to put a bottling tube on the tap there and bottle this beer. So that's batch priming. Not much to it really, but just a quick guide there to show you how I do it, and how much easier that makes the bottling process, hopefully. So there we have the finished product, all bottled up now, and that's just going to sit in a nice warm brew fridge in this case for a couple of weeks to carb up, and then hopefully we'll have a nice nicely carbonated beer at the end of it. Okay, so that's it, all done. Thanks for watching. See you soon, guys.